rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick Thomas. And tonight, of course, is... Oh, wait, what's going on here? Whiskey Wednesday. There we go. I just didn't hit the button hard enough. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. Yeah, my mom likes to go out for Taco Tuesday. Of course, then again, she also likes happy hour, too. Occasionally, I get messages from her during happy hour and Taco Tuesday. I got a message from her friend the other night where she, just last night, saying that they were out and something about my mom being crazy. But, that's just, old folks, retired old folks. That's just the way things go. All right. Well, as you guys can see, I am in a wonderful shirt, flag. This is the American Eagle and Flag shirt from theflagshirt.com. This is another one of their styles and designs. You can go and check it out at theflagshirt.com. And no, I'm not necessarily, I am pandering for them a little bit. So yeah, but this is one of the multiples, the different ones that I have for now. And tonight I am drinking the Four Roses bourbon. Hopefully I won't cough too much. I'm trying to avoid coughing as much as possible, but I'm no longer taking anything for it. So you can still hear, maybe a little bit of nasaliness from me, but that's just the way it is. And of course, that Four Roses is in the True Grit Roots Network tumbler glass here, and the rocks are in the bottom. So go ahead and good stuff. Good way to come back after a sickness. I would have done like a hot toddy. I've done hot toddies before, and I've liked those. But yeah. So anyway, so there we have it. There's that, and of course, because it is a True Grit Roots Network night, and as I can find everything, let's go ahead and I lost my. Where did it go? I lost my There it is. Lost my little script that I usually use. So, all right, let's get this show on the road here. True Grit Roots Network, TGRN.net. Of course, we're starting off our, I don't know if this is like a summer series, but occasionally we do live broadcasts and live shows. And this one is Outlaws Come to Gainesville, Texas. This is Saturday, April 20th at Bare Bones Barbecue. Presented and produced, of course, by True Grit, TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, Billy Stoops, and the Dirty Angels, along with Dallas Moore, will bring their roots, rockin' and outlaw country shows to the Boneyard at Bare Bones Barbecue for one singular night only, Saturday, April 20th at 8 p.m. Billy Stoops and Dallas Moore are multi-award-winning artists who bring their songs and stories to the stage that will bring you to your feet all night long. Tickets and information can be found at tgrn.net. That's tgrn.net. And of course, they are out of Austin, Texas. So you can go and check that out. You check us out on the web too. Listen to us at tgrn.net, and also where you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of digital music stations. You can also find us on Roku if you want to listen to us on your TV through the Live 365 Roku app, as well as Audacity, Audacy. Audacity has a killer app for listening on your phone and stuff too. So just fantastic stuff coming from tgrn.net. Of course, once again, that is out of Austin, Texas, and I am part owner in that endeavor. So let's definitely go with that. Okay, so let's kind of dig into it. Now, oh, wait, before I do that, shoot, I cannot forget. I keep forgetting to do this. I don't know why I keep forgetting to do this. But before we get really rocking and going, let me go ahead and let's, please, if you are of mind, stand up, take your hats off, put your hand over your heart, and recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And of course, thank you very much for that. We do live in this fantastic country called America, and it is, she is just amazing. An amazing country that no one else has ever seen on this planet. The things that we've been able to do is, just mediocre, honestly, mediocre people. And I'm not saying that we're necessarily mediocre, but we're average, normal, ordinary people, and we have done extraordinary things when we've put our minds to it. And one of the things that is extraordinary, often attempted to be duplicated, but never has been able to attain the same level of amazingness that we have, and that we have here in this country today, and that is the Constitution of the United States. Of course, one of the tantamount cornerstones of the U.S. Constitution is the understanding that we have rights and that our rights come from God, and that the Constitution is supposed to secure and protect those God-given rights and reign in government. And that's the key. The Constitution is not to give people rights. It is to reign in government and protect the people from their government, essentially. And it's amazing because we had SCOTUS just this week, earlier this week. They listened to the oral arguments of the Murphy versus Missouri, which is a First Amendment challenge to the Biden administration's pandemic-era censorship enterprise. Now, they rolled out like 20,000 pages. I mean, if you've been following this case, which I kind of have, but if you've been following this case, 20,000 pages of examples of where the Biden administration utilized non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and they essentially, what they essentially did is they used NGOs to kind of skirt the Constitution. And, again, there are certain things that the Supreme Court should just automatically either take on and slam dunk, or, even if there comes to certain questions, like, for an example, the 14th Amendment case that was just decided here recently, that was a slam dunk. 9-0, never should have gotten to that point realistically. I mean, it should have been dismissed right away, but because of the fact that we have such lawfare and legality, legal eagles, I don't want to call them eagles because that's disparaging to an eagle, but basically a whole bunch of legal pundits who are trying to distort our legal system in, in this lawfare that we've got going on. I mean, you just take a look at all the Trump cases that we're currently running around in, and you can see that this is really, really a big, I don't even remember this many like large, massive cases being thrown up in front of the Supreme Court until now. That being said, however, this one was probably one of the biggest, and I would have thought, honestly, that it would have just been a slam dunk. In fact, so much so that even when you have Second Amendment cases, I mean, Second Amendment cases, they have that statement at the end of the Second Amendment where it says, shall not be infringed. And you would think that the SCOTUS would be able to figure that out and like slam dunk it as quick as possible. But based on their questions and some of the things, now, honestly, Thomas and Alito, you can guarantee will side on the side of the American people and the Constitution, every single time. I mean, they, in terms of conservatives on the court, Thomas is at the top of the list, where Alito is a good, solid second. The problem, of course, is after that, things get a lot more murky. And so this is part of the reason why we are where we are in terms of today's court cases that we've been throwing around. Now, on the 14th Amendment case, I was actually extremely surprised, to be honest with you, that all of the justices, it wasn't just the conservative justices, but it is the leftist justices were really ripping the attorneys a new one in terms of all that. And so, I'm kind of surprised that didn't happen in this. In fact, I would have thought that a justice on the court, and let me be honest with you, let me be honest, really. Ketanji Brown Jackson's line of questioning and some of her thoughts, I mean, that just basically shows you that she's not a justice at all, that she doesn't really know the Constitution and definitely isn't looking to uphold it in certain cases. And the reason being is because of the fact that her line of questioning was basically, and she made a specific statement. She said that the First Amendment, do we really think that the First Amendment was designed to hamstring government? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times that I can say it on this program. The Constitution's purpose and the purpose of the first 10 amendments, if you read the Constitution and you read those 10 amendments, okay, they are all designed to limit government, to tell the government what it cannot do. Not what it is allowed to do, but what it cannot do. Now, the rest of the amendments after the 10th, when you start looking at things like the 11th and 12th and 13th, there's a whole bunch of other angles that are taken with each amendment as it was being written. Okay. But when you look at the first 10, and as I've told you multiple times, the first 10, which were added shortly after the original Constitution, the base Constitution, was written and ratified. But the first 10 amendments, and I'm looking it up here just to be absolutely certain that I'm giving you the correct date. The first 10 amendments were ratified December 15th, 1791. Okay. So the original Constitution was ratified in 1789. And so 1791 is just a short year and a half, 18 months, 2 years later. And they have the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments written and ratified by the states at the time. Now, the thing about it is that all of the 10 amendments that are written, the first one is actually written differently than the rest. And by that, I mean it literally states that Congress shall make no law. Okay? Congress shall make no law. And then it lists a bunch of different things. One of which is Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. And we can say, freedom of speech and press kind of put together, but this idea, especially the idea that Ketanji Brown Jackson kind of tossed out there, which is, well, do we really think that, in order to protect the government, that in order to protect the people, that the government has the ability to censor speech I think that's a bit of a stretch. And the reason that I say that is because you have to remember those first 10 amendments, as I've stated on this program, they were generated out of a group of individuals who had just finished fighting a war to gain independence from an oppressive regime. And so these first 10 in the Constitution are clear. You could trace them clearly to specific acts that the British government did against the American colonies. And so one of the things that is completely obvious was that the American colonies and the British were going and taking away the right to the press. They were trying to tell people what to write. And the British occupiers, when they came over, they attempted to confiscate the press and the ability for free speech in just a generic marketplace. And this is some of what they did as far as the British are concerned, in terms of the historical nature of where the first 10 amendments come from. And they were set aside, honestly, by the colonists or the newly formed America. They were set aside in specific into what is considered and called the Bill of Rights. And even the 9th and 10th Amendment, okay, even the 9th and 10th Amendment basically state that, hey, these are not necessarily all encompassing, meaning that they aren't the only rights that people have in our system, that they can be expounded upon, they can be expanded, that they can be something more. And that's what the 9th and the 10th Amendments were actually for. That they basically say, hey, this is a start of a list, but it's not the only list. And so that's the challenge here. And I'm going to be interested to see how they're going to rule on this, because I'll be honest, with the mixed results, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we end up with something like a 6-3 or a 5-4 decision on all of this. But as far as the line of questioning that was being done, there seems to be a non-consensus. It's not like the 14th Amendment case where they all basically came out saying, yeah, this is ridiculous. But they should do it in this particular case too. Because it's a clear violation for the federal government to sit there and try and convince these third-party entities in order to stop you from expressing yourself. Now, I will have to admit there is some precedent, honestly, being set and have been there has been precedent set, and a lot of that had to deal with the fact that the Supreme Court has said in the past that businesses can silence your speech, meaning that while you are representing that business, you just can't go and like stand up and give a political speech. Something like what I'm doing here. I can't necessarily name the business, assuming that I'm not going to get into trouble if that particular business didn't like what I was saying. But the fact of the matter is that there are some limits that have been placed on speech. There are some limits that have been placed on the expression, the free expression, which on the surface, if you were to sit there and look at it and read it and say, hey, free speech, yeah, I can say anything I want at any time and nobody can touch me. Well, that's not the case. So this is going to be very interesting to see how the court breaks this out and breaks this down. And it's not just the social media outlets, even though we have outlets like Rumble who basically say, hey, as long as it's not illegal, which is what Elon pretty much told Don Lemon in his interview the other day, was essentially that, if it's not illegal, we're not going to pull it down. Which is, a pretty sensible way to look at it. Now, whether or not that actually gets practically enforced, I don't know. I have been, let's say, put in timeout before for certain things that I've said. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my speech is completely kept from the public sphere, because we also have other places like Truth Social. And, if you get in jail in Facebook, for an example, that doesn't stop you from saying the same thing on X or saying the same thing on Truth Social. So this really is going to come down to whether or not, and this is part of the point that Judge Jackson was getting to as well, which essentially is that at what point do we consider the government providing coercion? Now, this is kind of an interesting tact for them to take because of the fact that, you could almost say that, hey, if the FBI comes, most of us are trained early on that if a police officer gives you a directive, I'm not going to call it an order, but gives you a directive, you generally tend to follow it. Even if you in some cases, question what that is, whether or not that is constitutional or something along those lines, because not everybody here is a lawyer. And so to sit here and to say that just having the FBI basically send a message to one of these outlets, one of these tech companies, and say, hey, by the way, you should watch this, or you should check this post out. That could potentially, in certain circles, be considered a coercive tactic. So this is going to be extremely interesting as to how SCOTUS is going to maneuver around this minefield. But again, I fully expect, based off of what we've seen and heard from the results coming out of the oral arguments, that there is going to be a split decision here, that this is not going to be the simple slam dunk, even though it should be, based off the evidence that we've seen so far. And we've already had not only the initial judge in the case, but also the court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld much of what the U.S. District Judge Terry Doherty, his preliminary injunction. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals characterized the administration's actions in this case as a coordinated campaign orchestrated by federal officials that jeopardized a fundamental aspect of American life. So, again, I don't think this is going to be as much of a slam dunk as, say, the 14th Amendment case was. So a lot is going to depend on what the SCOTUS and the majority believes is the idea of Congress making no law abridging the freedom of speech. Now, I've had a conversation with somebody on X, this was a while ago, when we were talking about this when it first was occurring, and they brought up a very interesting point, because if you look at that First Amendment, it states Congress shall make no law doing this. But what law has been made? What law has been created by Congress that is abridging this? Right now, there really isn't, other than a violation of what we consider to be the First Amendment. It's kind of an interesting angle to take when it comes to thinking about this, because it states that Congress shall make no law. It doesn't state that the executive branch can't ask or put out there or say to some NGO. But of course, we all know that the Constitution was not originally written with the idea that we're going to have technological advances like we do. I'm just going to be interested in seeing how they work through this situation. And this is going to be honestly, I mean, I'm going to step out on a limb and I'm going to say it, but this is our Roe versus Wade moment. Because for those of you that don't remember the Roe versus Wade decision, it was actually decided on the idea of privacy between a woman and her doctor. Realistically, if we were looking at this from the idea of the fact that we were going to take it as written, then yes, the First Amendment basically says that Congress can't make a law for this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the government can't coerce or push non-governmental organizations to silence people. I personally think this is opening up a Pandora's box. That again, I think it should be a slam dunk for SCOTUS to basically say, well, the intent The intent is meant that you can't stop people from speech. This is going to be very, very interesting to see. Now, honestly, like I said, I think this is going to be a split decision, but I don't know which way it's going to go. One way or the other. All right. Let me take a quick break real quick here and tell you about the Institute on the Constitution and its wonderful document here known as the Constitution of the United States, which you can purchase right here at constitution.americanperspective.online. This is a Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution, copy of the U.S. Constitution. It has fantastically rounded corners, but it also has an 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather right here in the front. The pages are rip-resistant as well as water-resistant, and it has stitching that goes all the way through the leather and everything, binding and all. It is fantastic. They have a 100-year warranty against defects in materials and workmanship. You can carry this thing around with you in your pocket. So if you're ever questioned on something, you can refer to it. I guarantee you the amendments are in numerical order with Roman numerals. It is buddy tested and buddy approved. Billy tasted and Billy approved. It has also been guaranteed to have you pass a civics exam, because my youngest whiskey warrior, who I haven't heard from in a while, I'm kind of hoping that he's still around. He's probably really busy, but my youngest whiskey warrior has checked it out and passed his civics exam in Scouts. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online, constitution.americanperspective.online, and get your copy today. And of course, support the show. And hey, while you're there, check out the rest of the books and other information that the Institute on the Constitution has. Fantastic document to own, and you can pass it on down to your kin as you go. Fantastic. All right. So, take a sip. Okay. Now, we have, if you recall, I was talking to you on Wednesday about the whole idea. Now, you remember with the Fani Willis case, the Georgia RICO case that got tossed. It didn't get tossed. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. It was challenged that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade can't stay on the case. And the idea was that they would, obviously remove Fani Willis. I think the full intent on that was to remove Fani and Nathan Wade and hopefully get a different prosecutor who essentially would have tossed the case, because let's face it, a lot of the charges were pretty thin. In fact, they were thin enough that Judge McAfee got rid of the phone call part, which amazingly, I read a little bit in one of these articles that I have in the description. You can go and take a look. And what you find out is that the phone call, the recording of the phone call. Now, this is how legalese actually works. But the phone call was actually recorded in Florida. And because Florida's laws with regards to recording someone require what's called two-party consent, meaning that both the person making the phone call as well as the other end has to give consent to be recorded, and that did not happen. The judge actually went ahead and tossed it, tossed that charge. So the one major charge or the one major piece of evidence that they have in this has already been tossed out because of the fact that they can't use it. Now, that being said, it's the rest of it, and there are other charges. There were a few other charges that the judge found a little specious and questionable in terms of their application and so on and so forth. So out of the several charges that were brought during this RICO case, several of them also were tossed out. And, this case by itself is really starting to fall apart. In fact, it's falling apart so much. It's falling apart so much that the liberal media, according to this article in Red State, let me go ahead and bring it up here. The liberal media is starting to turn on Willis and call for her to self-remove. So here's the thing is that, you all know from last episode, I did tell you that Wade went ahead and immediately resigned. I mean, when the judge's order came out that both of them cannot stay on the case, that either one or the other has to go, Wade immediately bowed out. Now, as I told you before, there are still some things that are unsatisfied there. For an example, the exorbitant amount of money that Wade made, the perjury that they had in terms of their conversation as to when their relationship started. There's further evidence that has come out due to the discovery that was going on during this hearing for their disqualification, that are still going to have to be handled some way, if at all. But hopefully they will be handled soon. But in this particular case, they're now the left. And remember, the left eats their own. I mean, when things don't work right, the left turns on itself. And that's exactly what they are doing here. They are calling for her to resign and remove herself from the case. And a lot of this has to deal with the fact that there were some things that McAfee stated in his opinion where he said that either one or the other has to go. The thing about it is that he brought up the point that they were questionable, that their answers were questionable. So he literally was bringing out the idea that she lied under oath. Okay. He also sort of skirted the issue because, again, as I said last time, the Georgia law basically says all that has to be there for a conflict of interest to exist is the mere appearance of a conflict of interest. Well, that didn't happen. He didn't rule that way, which, of course, opened up, as I said, the idea of a potential appeal. Well, that has happened. Trump's attorney has sought an appeal. Now, in order for that appeal to have happened, and yes, Judge, odor of mendacity is the correct terminology, or the exact terminology that Judge McAfee put in the opinion. The thing is that in order for the disqualification, the appeal to have moved forward in the disqualification ruling, Judge McAfee had to agree to it. Well, this just came out. Georgia judge allows Trump to appeal Fani Willis, Fani Willis, Fani Willis, Fooney Willis, whatever her freaking name is, disqualification ruling. So he has now basically said, and this is Judge McAfee, keep in mind, he has now decided he is allowed he's granted a very brief order issued today. He has granted the certificate of immediate review requested by Trump and 8 of his co-defendants in this racketeering case. And so, it's now, they are now, meaning that the defendants are now expected to ask the Court of Appeals to take up the disqualification battle before the case goes to trial. Now, what is this going to do? Okay, so because of the fact that it's going to the Court of Appeals, this will delay the case even further than what it was before. And, ironically, as a part of the appeal, they will also be able to introduce the things like the text messages and some of the other information that McAfee didn't allow in the original hearing. And so there's going to be even more evidence that's going to be presented at the Court of Appeals trial. Now, I would hope that this is going to lead to the case being dismissed, as Steve Sadow, who is Trump's lead Georgia attorney, said in a statement that McAfee's granting that certificate, this is highly significant. It means the defense is permitted to apply to the Court of Appeals for a pretrial review of the judge's order refusing to dismiss the case or disqualify Fulton County DA Willis. The defense is optimistic that appellate review will lead to the case being dismissed and the DA being disqualified. Now, McAfee has made it clear that he's not pausing proceedings in his court. He wrote in his ruling that the court intends to continue addressing the many other unrelated pending pretrial motions, regardless of whether petition is granted within 45 days of filing, and even if any subsequent appeal is expedited by the appellate court. So what he's saying there is essentially that he is not going to stop all of the other unrelated stuff, probably in the idea that we need to, to speed up and have some expediency when the time comes. But the key here, though, is that, again, here we're going to go to a different court. She, she is not going to necessarily be in charge here. And we also don't have the whole suspected situation with her working, or him working under her, or however that worked out. They worked together in the past. And then the whole idea of him contributing to her campaign. So all of those rumors and things get dispelled and get taken care of, which might be the reason as to why he decided to grant the certificate, because if he didn't, he would end up being in the same hot water that frickin' Engeron is in right now, with the whole specious $454 million ruling or whatever up there. So, so they're going to bring it to the higher court, and it's probably going to reverse the ruling, we hope, and, of course, stall the case or possibly even get the charges tossed completely. Now, speaking of that $454 million judgment up in New York, Trump has attempted, because what a lot of people don't understand is most of the time when the rich have money, okay, they don't necessarily keep it in vaults like what you would see, Scrooge McDuck sitting in the room or in the vault and counting all the gold and counting all the money. Well, the gold is one thing, but counting all of the money that is in their possession. More often than not, what they do is they go and they invest in certain things that are going to increase in value, whether that is gold or silver or stocks, or potentially even things like real estate, as an example, which many people will sit there and tell you that real estate is a great investment because real estate almost always can weather market drops and things like that. It's not like the stock market where it's more speculative. But understand, I'm not necessarily a financial advisor here. But these people these rich people, they might be valued at a significant amount of money, but I guarantee you they're not, they don't sit there with piles of cash. In other words, it's not liquid. And that's what they're talking about. When you're talking about liquid assets, you're talking about things that you could sell quickly. For an example, gold would be considered a liquid asset because you could probably sell it fairly quickly. There's not a lot of debate in terms of its value. People generally will want to buy gold and silver and platinum and those kinds of things. But the thing about it is that rich people generally don't run around with like money just sitting stuffed in their mattresses. They go and they invest it. They put it into other things with the idea of increasing their wealth, increasing the money that they have. And so what they're doing is it's just absolutely crazy trying to make Trump come up with all of this liquid cash. And so one of the biggest challenges that he has, of course, is a lot of his cash is actually tied up into real estate, his businesses, the buildings that he owns. And they can't be liquidated that quickly. They can be liquidated, yes, but they cannot be liquidated that quickly because you have a bit of a process with regards to it. So what typically happens when a business owner or a rich person goes to apply for a loan, they borrow against an asset that they own, such as a piece of property or something, some physical item that maybe can't be liquidated that quickly, but is a good piece of value. And so here's the problem, is that Trump has gone around and attempted to get loans essentially against some of his properties. And these people who normally loan things, I mean, they're not stupid. They're there to make the money, and they have what's considered risk. This isn't like walking into a, Texas Hold'em game or a blackjack table and assuming that, hey, everything is going to roll the dice my way, which we all know, if anybody that's smart anyway, knows that there's not very many gambling establishments that actually have a return on investment for the player. It's usually the house's advantage in 90% of the game, 95% of the games that are there. And so what ends up happening is Trump basically says, hey, I'll put up my properties and you guys can go ahead and we'll use that as collateral. Well, the challenge, of course, is that if that bond company goes and says, all right, and Trump happens to lose in the appellate court. Now, keep in mind, the appellate court is still in New York. This isn't like he's moving out of him into a more friendly position. So now what he ends up doing is he has to put up his properties. Well, most of the time they're going to want properties that are going to be close by. And the challenge, of course, is that now they're saying, well, yeah, but you personally can't do business for 3 years here in New York. So how am I going to get my money back? And so they're looking at this as not a great possibility of a return on investment. meaning the bond companies in this particular case. And so now he is kind of stuck. Now, he only had 30 days from the time that Judge Engoron entered his order in order to pay that bond. And by the way, according to this piece in Hot Air, that bond, which everybody has been talking about at $454 million, it actually is a lot higher than that. It's almost to $560 million. So it's over a $500 million that he's going to have to put up. Now, Letitia James has obviously made it clear in the media and the press that she is more than willing to take his properties. In fact, she has an eye on Trump Tower, reportedly for the explicit use of housing illegal aliens that are living in New York right now. Okay, but apparently it accrues, that particular judgment accrues $112,000 in interest daily. Trump's tried at over 30 firms, and nobody is really interested at this point. And realistically, as I think he admitted, most of them are like, yeah, we don't need real estate holdings, which of course, that's where most of Trump's money is tied up in, is real estate. So, realistically, yeah, this is really going to be questionable. I'm kind of hoping that somebody somewhere who has the money is going to be able to front it for him. But again, I mean, even there have been suggestions that Elon Musk should be able to do this. Well, if you recall, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was for $44 million or whatever it was. I can't remember if it was a million or billion, but whatever it was. And he ended up having to get financiers to fund half of it for him. He put up half, but the other half was put up by investors and speculative folks who were looking to get their money back, of course. Now, keep in mind, if Trump doesn't make it, that is just going to be the icing on the cake for Letitia James. Now, Letitia James spent a lot of time running on the idea of getting Trump. In fact, there's been montages of videos out. I wish I would have grabbed one, but I didn't think of it. But anyway, there have been montages of her saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to get Trump, and people even coming to her like parties and things like that and coming up to her in the public and saying, hey, when are you going to sue him? Well, here's the thing, is that if he doesn't bring this up, or if he can't do it, then he is going to lose those properties. Now, granted, I told you about this wonderful thing, again, known as the Constitution, and there's a specific amendment that looks toward this kind of scenario. Let's take a look here real quick. This will be Amendment 8. And it says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. That's simply it. That's all it is. That's the entire amendment, just that one statement. So this entire situation up in New York could very well become an Eighth Amendment violation, in which case you will see it up at the Supreme Court if it can get that far. But Trump has to get it over this hurdle first. All right. Now, another thing has happened, of course. We had some more primaries earlier this week. And of course, I don't know if anybody watches Battleground Live with Sean Parnell, but Sean Parnell has the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, known as Savage Rich Barris. He is one of the pollsters that has been very correct. He's one of the few pollsters that I would say that I would trust more so than any other pollster that's out there. And he breaks it down piece by piece. This is going to be a very interesting year in 2024 for this event, for this election cycle. Now, I'm just going to tell you, my opinion is 2024 is the election cycle, that if we lose in 2024, we are going to lose bigly. To steal a word from Donald Trump, we are going to lose bigly. But some of the things that came out of that is the fact that there were some races, in particular in Florida, that are indicating things are not going Biden's way. That he is actually losing people of color. He is actually losing places like the Latino vote. And for whatever reason, he believes that up in Michigan, that the reason that he is not polling well in Michigan has to deal with the Dearborn folks, meaning the people, the Palestinian supporters that are up there. But the thing is that it's more than just that. However, some good news here out of the Daily Fetched. Democrats are starting to sound the alarm. Biden has no chance of beating Trump. These polls that are coming out, they're starting to scare these folks. They are really starting to scare these people. Okay? And the reason being is because the polls, even the left-wing polls like ABC News, NBC News, the Ipsos polls, all of these other polls that are running out there, they're starting to show that Donald Trump has got an advantage against Joe Biden. Not an advantage that's within the margin of error, but an actual measurable advantage. One of the key people, and unfortunately he comes from my state, he's Representative Adam Smith. He's a Democrat from Washington, which, believe it or not, there are Republicans in Washington, although most of them live on the opposite side of the mountains from me. But he told, Adam Smith told NBC News, quote, Biden stood up in front of the whole world and said, I'm ready. I'm the guy who can take down Donald Trump. And yet, he says, continuing the quote here, so he better do it. We don't have time for him to be worried about whether or not people are saying things right or the poll numbers are where they should be. I want focused energy and not defensive anger. His current approval rating, according to, is right around 38%, according to poll data, and is lower at this stage than the last three presidents who went on to lose re-election, Trump being one of them, of course. According to the Gallup survey data, Trump sat at 48%, George H.W. Bush sat at 39%, and Jimmy Carter sat at 43%, but Biden is even lower at 38%. Yeah. Now, Biden apparently is seething while reviewing these poll numbers, especially in Michigan and Georgia, after his popularity plummeted over the Israeli-Hamas war, which, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, he's been trying to push Israel to keep Hamas in place and not wipe them out completely. Which Netanyahu, let's admit, and the other Israelis are basically saying, yeah, stay out of our war. We'll do what we need to do, which he should. He really should. But apparently, according to some reports, according to a White House spokesperson, President Biden makes national security decisions based on the country's national security needs alone, no other factor, although he's been reportedly taking his anger out on his staff under the messaging that has failed to connect, like Bidenomics, for an example. Like Bidenomics. Yeah. Anyway, so that's one of the things that's going on right now, is that he is essentially losing what is normally his coalition, by the way, and what brought him around in 2020, but he's losing it right now because of his decisions. Now, let's take a short break and let me tell you about this wonderful thing that I've got going on. I actually have two stores going on right now. You can still pick up the Whiskey Musings broadcast stuff over at store.whiskeymusings.online. And not like I'm extremely creative here, but the other store that is available to get logoed gear. For now, I've got some plans to expand, but for right now, it is just the American Perspective logo on some sweatshirts, t-shirts, and hoodies. But you can head on to store.americanperspective.online and check out the gear that I have available. I do have a couple coffee mugs in here too. You can also find links to that Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution that I talked about, as well as a link to go over to the old Whiskey Musings store and pick up Whiskey Musings stuff over there. But I've got some great three basic colors for the most part, because let's be honest, my color coordination of my logo didn't really work with things like purple and pink. So you've got white, black, and gray, but hey, that's okay. Three different styles of logo you can check out. Three different options there. And I promise you, I'm getting to where I'm going to expand this to some other offerings as well, for these kinds of things as well. Head off to store.americanperspective.online and check it out today. And I do appreciate you doing so, of course, and the proceeds of those sales go directly to supporting the show. All right, so let's move on to the next big thing in news, which is, no, it's the old store, Judge. Judge Wild over here says old whiskey. Over on Rumble says old whiskey or old store. So anyway, let's move on to the next biggest thing, which of course is the House subcommittee on the Biden impeachment. Now, I know this is going to sound a little bit like I'm beating a dead horse here, because most of you folks, you all pretty much know this. So if you actually watched the testimony of the four Biden associates, or in this case, the first couple of Biden associates, Tony Bobulinski in particular, you would pretty much know just about everything that is out there for it. And, you know, nothing was really a surprise here in terms of this. However, one of the things that did happen is Tony Bobulinski, and I hope he's got some good security, to be honest with you. I hope he's got some good security, because he may need it. But Tony Bobulinski flat out came out and stated that Hunter Biden committed perjury. He called the family members, Jim, Joe, and Hunter, called them liars, saying that he hoped to provide the truth about the family during the hearing. And again, keep in mind, this is a public public forum, which ironically Hunter Biden way back in the day was like, hey, I'll testify in front of a public forum, and yet his lawyers responded to this request because he was supposed to show up as well, and he politely declined. So yeah, that's interesting. That he declined that. Sorry, I got to get rid of a spammer over on Facebook. But anyway, so Tony Bobulinski came out literally firing on all cylinders, and it got a little heated. So he went and jumped at a couple of people in particular, even on the panel. For an example, one of the things that he went after was Jamie Raskin. Jamie Raskin, he was saying, was lying about stuff and that he was going to leave the committee and lie. Tony Bobulinski was not holding back. I'm just going to tell you that right now. At least I don't think he was. And anyway, really quick before I go too far, I've got to give a shout out to Daybreak. Thank you very much. Daybreak says, thank you, Rick, for using the Constitution in your show. And I do appreciate the Rumble rant. That is awesome. But anyway, as I was saying, Tony Bobulinski was firing on all kinds of cylinders here. And in fact, it even got to the point where some of the things that Bobulinski was saying kind of got him going. So Bobulinski first engaged and started talking about stuff. He noted during his statement about his impeccable military record and that he had worked hard to become independently wealthy. He discussed about his first engagement with Hunter Biden in 2015 about forming an entity with the Chinese energy conglomerate. Now, if you recall, a lot of this situation that we're talking about, many people focus on things like Burisma and Joe Biden being on videotape, basically saying to the Burisma or to the Ukrainian government at the time that if you don't fire that special prosecutor, you're not going to get the $1 billion that we have, which literally is a quid pro quo, by the way. I mean, that's what they, accused Donald Trump of doing, but he didn't. And Joe Biden is on tape in public saying that he did. But the thing about it is that Bobulinski has held his testimony the same throughout this entire time. When he first came out and started talking about this, one of his quotes from this is that I want to be crystal clear from my direct personal experience and what I have subsequently come to learn. It is clear to me that Joe Biden was the brand being sold by the Biden family. His family's foreign influence peddling operation from China to Ukraine and elsewhere sold out to foreign actors who were seeking to gain influence and access to Joe Biden and the United States government. Bobulinski also stated that the president was an active and aware enabler of his family's business pursuits, a claim that Joe, James, and Hunter have all repeatedly and adamantly denied. So that's one of the things that he was saying, that they potentially perjured themselves in front of Congress. Bobulinski noted during Hunter Biden's deposition with Congress last month, the first son was asked directly if his father had ever met with any of Hunter Biden's business partners. The younger Biden replied no. Bobulinski said that in particular was an example of perjury because he himself had met with Joe Biden in 2017. So this is first-hand information. This firsthand information, not hearsay, not, oh, I heard somebody else talking about the. Tony Bobulinski was there. Tony Bobulinski was there. Now, the fireworks didn't end with Tony Bobulinski, although he was definitely a part of it. In fact, there were some fireworks where Tony Bobulinski and the defenses guy, and I can't think of who the person was, but there was a time where the two of them were actually attacking each other, yelling at each other. But I put a link in for a running commentary from Fox News with regards to this whole thing. I put it in the description in the video. And the latest breaking news from this post is that Representative James Comer has stated on X that in the coming days, he's going to invite President Joe Biden to the House Oversight Committee to provide his own testimony and explain why his family received tens of millions of dollars from foreign companies with his assistance. James Comer is not backing down on this. Yeah, so the witnesses were throwing accusations at each other, as I was mentioning earlier, and this was began after Representative Matt Gaetz slammed Democrats for inviting former Rudy Giuliani associate Lev Parnas as their witness, referencing his past criminal convictions and asking GOP witness Tony Bobulinski for his reaction. Tony Bobulinski, again, not backing down. He basically said, I think it's laughable that the Democrats are asking Lev Parnas to weigh in on my credibility. A convicted felon who served jail time, I have an impeccable record. Bobulinski added that Parnas warned him earlier in the hearing that Democrats were coming after him, to which Parnas responded, I didn't warn you. I just said, keep talking. You'll be there soon. Bobulinski responded to Parnas, I look forward to that. And Parnas hit him back saying, keep lying. You'll be there soon. Bobulinski then asked if that was a threat, to which Parnas answered, no, it's just the truth. Bobulinski said, did you say they were coming for me? And Parnas responded, no, I said if you keep lying, you will end up in prison. And Bobulinski, of course, says, I'm not lying. You're the one who is lying. You're the one that went to prison for lying. So, yeah, it got a little heated and a little fiery toward the end of the day there. But, this is not going well. Now, granted, keep in mind that this is not going to necessarily lead to an impeachment of Joe Biden. But as I've said multiple times in the past, as long as this stuff can get out there and become more and more believable, and more people believe what is happening, and they start to get the layers of the Democrat onion peeled away to find out the truth, like what I am pushing out on my show here, and other conservative pundits are doing, the message is going to get out. And the message will be loud and clear that the Biden family is the Biden crime family, that Joe Biden is a corrupt politician of over 50 years in politics, and he needs to go. And he needs to go. Now, I want to take a second and shift gears a little bit here, because I haven't really discussed a lot of this in the past, but this whole concept of DEI and basing decisions on race, culture, that kind of thing, where we are using anything other than a merit-based system to bring people into, specifically into particular jobs in particular locations, well, that is starting to, of course, permeate and cause some serious problems. I've talked about on the past shows, we've talked about how military recruiting is down, and that we've even discussed in some cases medical places that are bringing people in who have potentially lower scores or don't even pass the SATs to get into universities and medical schools just because of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or something along those lines. Well, there's certain jobs that, I'll be honest with you, one of them being like an open heart surgery type person. I want to have, if I'm going under the knife, I want to have the best possible surgeon that my money can buy. I want to have the best possible surgeon in that hospital. And this is permeating elsewhere. There's a couple other places that I don't want someone who has been considered to have that position because of the fact that they are simply in some woke checkbox category. For an example, going and building an airplane. I would like to know for certain that my airplane is actually airworthy and doesn't have shit falling off of it. Okay? I want to know that when I call the police, I am getting someone who is coming who knows what to do, how to do it, and can do it effectively. I want to know, for an example, if I'm going to hire a lawyer, that lawyer has the mindset, the knowledge base, the ability to argue in court effectively on my behalf. Well, these two next stories are proving things are not as we would like them to be. First of all, in PJ Media, apparently the Nashville Police Department has lowered their physical requirements in order to bring more women to the police force. Now, here's the thing, and this is true. I mean, in the piece here, and this is really Ed Koch, Koch, K-O-C-H, however you pronounce that. He was New York mayor at the time, and he had a common sense approach to hiring first responders. And I totally agree with this. He said, I don't care what sex a firefighter is, as long as they can carry a 200-pound mayor out of a burning building. I don't care whether or not my open heart surgeon is black, white, Native American, Hispanic, Indian, doesn't make any difference. I want to know that that person is medically competent to be able to save my life when I go under the knife. See, this is the thing that the left doesn't seem to understand, is that most people, the majority of people, believe in common sense approaches. They don't care whether a person fits into a specific category. We don't care about that. What we do care is whether or not the person is capable of doing the job. That's what America's merit-based system is based off of. But here we have the Nashville Police Department, where they just dropped the ability test requirement in order to increase its female force from 13% to 30%, according to End Wokeness. Now, think back. There was this highly publicized case where it took 3 or 4 individuals, police individuals, fairly strong, big individuals, to bring down an individual who was on PCP and coke and meth and God knows what other kinds of drugs were out there at the time. And it took them forever to take it down, to take that person down. You can find videos all over the internet of police officers attempting to take down some of these drug addicts who are hopped up on certain drugs and have the strength of 2 and 3 times greater than what they normally would. And so now you're going to relax the requirements for a beat cop to go and become a police officer. Now, End Wokeness sent out a video on the Nashville Police Department and also posted a video of 4 female cops. Now, End Wokeness, just to put it out there, they said overweight female cops tried to arrest a single male shoplifter for close to 2 minutes. He ended up escaping. Now, you can take a look at the article, the PJ Media article. Here's the you can see here on Rumble. You can see the video is right there. You can go and watch it. But I've seen this kind of thing happen. I've even seen like 2 or 3 able-bodied men try and stop somebody hopped up on illicit drugs and not being able to do it. And it's even more so than just this. Now, I mentioned lawyers. Well, guess what? My home state just had a freaking court case go to the Washington Supreme Court. And guess what? Our lawyers no longer have to pass the bar exam. This in Blaze Media, passing bar exam no longer required for a law license in Washington state because of, quote, race equity concerns. Now, granted, most people would say, you know, what's the positive out of a busload of lawyers going over a cliff? Well, there's less lawyers in the world. That's the positive. What's the negative? Well, the front seat only had 1 lawyer in it rather than 2. But, most people don't care for lawyers up until the point you need one. And I'm sorry, but that's one of those kinds of places that I would like to have a competent attorney. And the only way to test competence in the law has to deal with the bar exam. Now, granted, they do have other possibilities here, which in all actuality, I'll be honest with you, it doesn't really surprise me that Washington State did this because I really did look into this. Washington State was one of the few states prior to this that essentially allowed you, if you were not going to, that wanted to do law, by the way, wanted to practice law, you didn't have to go to law school as long as you could pass the bar in the past. But now, if you don't have to pass the bar, I'm just wondering, thinking actually of considering of doing this, going and applying for a law license and becoming a lawyer in Washington. I don't have to go to law school. I don't have to pass the bar. What else do I have to do? Well, apparently they went ahead and put in 2 experimental ways of earning a law license. One way involves law school graduates and upper level students apprenticing under a supervising attorney for 6 months. The other requires law school students to complete 500 hours of hands-on practical work as well as 12 other skills credits. Now, it looks like they may have changed the law to make it now you have to have gone through law school, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see what in the heck is going on here. But this is what DEI does to you. This is what DEI is bringing to our world as of today. And this is, I'll be honest with you, utterly freaking ridiculous. But hey, whatever works. All right, so one last thing about Trump and his lawsuits, really quick here, speaking of laws and lawyers. So the left is freaking out over Judge Cannon and her handling of the documents case down in Florida. Now, I contend that the documents case down in Florida is being handled the appropriate way. And so anyway, the judge actually in Eileen Cannon opened up the possibility of the jury actually seeing some of the records in the Trump document case. Now, what's interesting here is that she actually has ordered preparations of 2 separate jury instructions. And the idea here, of course, is to look at this from 2 separate perspectives. And this from the Epoch Times. She issued an order on March 18th that requires President Trump's attorneys and special counsel Jack Smith's team to each prepare and file their respective preliminary jury instructions along with proposed verdict forms by April 2nd. Now, she ordered the jury instructions to include proposed language that relates to the issue of unauthorized possession of the documents. So again, if you recall, as I talked about a little while ago, or last episode, I think it was, she dismissed the motion to dismiss due to this being a Presidential Records Act case with the stipulation that it could be brought back up later in the case. And so this is one of the things that they're talking. So she specifically ordered the preparation of 2 separate drafts of jury instructions, one based on the idea or the scenario where the jury can decide if prosecutors have proven that a given record obtained by President Trump was either, quote, presidential or personal. And then the second one, based on the scenario where they must accept that President Trump used executive powers to declassify the documents and categorize them as personal. Now, the left is freaked out a little bit about this. They say that this is prejudicial against the prosecution, which again, keep in mind, the Constitution basically says that the president himself is the executive branch and that the president can do just about anything within the executive branch without oversight from any other entity except for Congress in the cases of impeachment. That's the Constitution. And in the past, the Presidential Records Act has only been run through civil court, not criminal court, because there are no criminal statutes and punishments for this. This is typically a civilian matter and not a criminal one. And the fact that Trump is being brought up against this case or on this case for being like the first president, really. I mean, other than Clinton had it with his sock drawer, but the court found there that the president, and this is something that I still am waiting for the left to come around to this, but the Presidential Records Act and the precedent set by that case has essentially stated that the president has the ability to choose what is presidential records and what is personal records. So this is another one that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And which, by the way, too, I mean, just as a alternative thought, the only case realistically right now that is not going to be tried in federal court at the moment that has to deal with these kinds of issues is the Georgia RICO case. So if the Georgia RICO case gets thrown, that means that potentially, theoretically, Trump could be elected president and absolve himself of all of this Jack Smith crap. It's possible. Entirely possible. All right. So do me a favor before you take off, please hit that thumbs up button. Again, Rumble watches and uses that as a gauge for that. Yeah. Outlaw Dogs also points out, too, that AOC says that RICO is not a crime, according to AOC. Well, AOC isn't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. But anyway, if you are not part of Rumble, please head on over to Rumble and subscribe. And while you are there, find the American Perspective with Rick Thomas channel and go ahead and be sure to hit that green follow button. We will see you Wednesday night. Not Wednesday. Tonight's Wednesday. What am I saying? See, you've got me all drunk. We'll see you Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on the American Perspective with Rick Thomas. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you guys Saturday. Good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.